You're listening to Packers Talk Network.
You're listening to No Huddle Radio on the Packers Talk Radio Network, your home for in-depth and thoughtful Packers analysis. I'm your host, Gil Martin. My co-host is my good friend, Sean Tehan. In addition to this show, I write for thepackerspost.com and Cheesehead TV. Sean was a TV sportscaster in Minnesota. We're here to talk Packers because you're all here for one thing, and that's a love for Green Bay football. And Sean, the holidays are right around the corner, and the Packers primetime parade continues with a Monday night game at home against against the Saints at Lambeau. But before we get to that, how about a word from our sponsor?
Yeah, and if you want to be part of the festivities on Monday Night Football at Lambeau Field, Wisconsin's own Ticket King, well, they got you covered for over 30 years. Ticket King has been providing Packers tickets to Packer fans. You can find them on the web at theticketking.com. If you're following with us on YouTube, you can see the link right on your screen, or visit their locations in Green Bay and Milwaukee. And for direct links to specific Packers game tickets, go to packerstalk.com/tickets or browse their website at theticketking.com. Once again, the links are right there on your screen if you're following along with us live on YouTube today. Hit that subscribe button while you're at it. Tell your friends, tell your family, tell Gil's friends and family, tell my friends and family. I've been doing my best. Gil's been doing his best. Hit that like and subscribe button. A lot of Packers content outside of ours, a lot of good stuff. And it's always a fun time talking about the Packers when, you know, especially when you're a win in the playoff scenario like Green Bay is, where one more win and you're going to the dance, man. You're going to the dance.
Yeah, that's the next step, right? I mean, you start the season, you want to play well, you want to lock up a playoff berth. Hopefully you get as high a seed as possible, and then you want to be playing your best football come January and February, maybe, fingers crossed, because, it's been a great ride so far this season, a lot of ups and downs, but so far this team has done a good job of overcoming a lot of the obstacles that have been set before them.
Yeah, and the Packers, they're in such an interesting situation where they're at 10-4 right now. They'd be winning the NFC East. They'd be winning the NFC South. They'd be second in they'd be winning the NFC South. They would be second in the NFC East. They'd be winning the NFC West right now, yet they're in third place in the NFC North division. And it seems like the division title is kind of out of reach, mainly because Detroit holds the season sweep, and they hold the tiebreaker over Green Bay. So the big thing is right now, it's like, you know, Green Bay's in really good shape for getting one of those wild card playoff spots with having the head-to-head tiebreaker over the Rams and the head-to-head tiebreaker now over Seattle and San Francisco and Arizona, and I can go on and on about that. So the big question now is with Jaire Alexander, the all-pro corner. We know what he's capable of. We know how good he is when he's healthy, but he has been healthy. He's been dealing with that PCL issue in his knee since that final defensive play in Jacksonville back in week 8, and he's pretty much been out for the last 6 games. He played 10 snaps against the Bears, and now the Packers are in a position where, hey, they've been winning games without Jaire Alexander this season. They've been able to find a way to win. Jeff Hafley's done a really good job coordinating the defense even without Jaire Alexander. Jaire Alexander's now, his presence makes it a lot easier for the defense to operate. But, Gil, if you're the Green Bay Packers, you're 1 win away. You should win one of your last 3 games to get in the playoffs. It would be pretty surprising if the Packers don't win one of their last 3 games coming up to end the regular season. You're playing well without Jaire Alexander, but you want him ready to go for the playoffs. What would be the best plan for Jaire Alexander's potential return to Green Bay?
You know, to me, I would wait 1 more week and have him go next week against the Vikings. First of all, if you play him Monday night, it's a short week, and I don't think that's advantageous. You want to give him as much time as possible to recover from his first game. Yeah. I'd rather have him available against the Vikings than against, you know, the third string quarterback of the New Orleans Saints, which we'll get to a little bit later on in the show. But to me, I want him to play 2 games if possible to make sure he's ready, that the knee is responding properly, that come playoff time, we've got Jaire ready to go, if at all possible. The only potential drawback I see to waiting until next week is it's a game on AstroTurf, and that's a little harder on the knee. So that makes me hesitate a little, but I still think it's the best available choice given all the possibilities. What about you? What are your thoughts?
Well, it's interesting because there's no load management in the NFL. We don't see load management like we do in the NBA quite often. If you're ready to play, you're ready to play. And Jair, it was interesting. Last week, we thought he was trending towards playing in Seattle. He was a full participant in Wednesday practice and Thursday practice. Then he didn't practice Friday. Matt LaFleur just said straight up, I don't think he's ready to go. I don't think he's ready to play. And the Packers still were able to handle business up in Seattle, where just the Packers have had all sorts of hell over the years and didn't have that many issues on Sunday without Jair Alexander in place. Carrington Valentine got his first career interception. Like long overdue he was right there for that. But with Jair, though, he was a full participant in practice on Thursday as well. And you got to think that knee is getting better. But I'm with you, though, where I wouldn't play him against a third-string quarterback in New Orleans with Spencer Rattler, or if Jake Haener comes in as well. But the thing is, if you do play him, maybe you only play him in the passing situation packages. You play him in the dime packages. You play him if you have 6 DBs or more on the field. You get him on the field just to get him some reps and everything. Where I'm with you, where I wanted him to shake out the rust. I don't know if I want to see him play against Minnesota, mainly because of the turf concerns. But Green Bay may have to play on turf coming up in the playoffs. There's a very good chance they may have to play on some turf in this postseason, whether it's Detroit, whether it's back in LA against the Rams, if it's somehow Arizona plays on grass, even though they're indoors, but Minnesota's on turf as well. There's a very good possibility that could happen too. But for me, I think I'd be most comfortable, honestly, keeping him out this weekend, next week, and then have him play the season finale against the Bears in those passing defense categories. But if the medical staff says, hey, you're 100%, like he's 100% healed, he's good to go, you got to play him. But if he's not even 90%, it's like, don't risk it, man. We're not in win or go home mode yet. Once we get to that point, then it's like, hey, time to play.
And look, the odds, according to most websites, that the Packers make the playoffs is like 99%. So realistically, even if they lose their last 3 games, it would take a bunch of weird things to happen for the Packers to not make the playoffs. So to me, the important thing, the strategy has to be, you do what you have to do to make sure he is as ready and as healthy as possible for the first playoff game, and hopefully that he can continue to play from there. The best, the question is, how do you do that?
Yeah, it's just I don't think there's a right or wrong answer either, where if I'm pretty much, I tend to trust the Packers medical staff, where a lot of the times we hear players complaining about the medical staff where they're a little bit too conservative and they're a little bit too precautionary. Now, if you ask Martellus Bennett back in the day, he thought that, he thought the opposite, which I think was kind of insane, because a lot of players are like, no, if anything, they keep you out longer than you want.
Right.
And I feel like if the medical staff gives the thumbs up, like, yeah, he's good to go, he's going to play, and you got to play him. But I would love to see him play against Justin Jefferson in Minnesota. I would love to see him. I'd love to see him play on Monday Night Football against the New Orleans Saints. But I think a Week 18 return in just certain packages, just six DB packages, essentially, where if he's on the field for those passing situations, that's the best time to get some run. But it's not only Jair Alexander, though. You got to consider other guys like safety Javon Bullard, who's currently week to week still with that ankle issue. Quay Walker had an ankle injury suffered in the win on Sunday night in Seattle as well. Those are other guys where I think they're going to be a little more conservative with, especially given how significant those injuries appear to be for those 2 defenders. But I think the Packers are in a prime position where they could be a little more precautionary than normal, and that's the benefit of the situation right now.
Yeah, that much they've earned, that they can, go out there and have a little bit of wiggle room as far as, like I said, 99% chance of making the playoffs. So you just go out there and get your guys ready for the postseason.
And speaking of injuries, let's get to the Packer injury report real quick this week for their game against the Saints at Lambeau Field. Not practicing on Thursday. That includes Javon Bullard and Quay Walker, both dealing with ankle issues. Matt LaFleur said both players are week to week. You got to hope that maybe they're ready to go for the playoffs. And then also Jordan Morgan, the rookie first-round offensive lineman out of Arizona. Matt LaFleur was on the Matt Scheidman podcast of The Athletic. Matt Scheidman of The Athletic, on his podcast this week and said that rookie first-round pick Jordan Morgan is out for the season with a shoulder injury. He was spotted at practice last week in a sling. Obviously didn't look promising, but given that injury news, Gil, the Packers' offensive line has been really good as a collective, from left to right, with Rasheed Walker, Elton Jenkins. Josh Myers obviously been up and down, but Sean Ryan's had a good year. Zach Tom's been great at right tackle. You just hope that they could stay together and they don't have another significant injury coming up on that offensive line later this year.
Yeah, the lack of depth, especially in the middle, is concerning, and that's where I think they can't afford. The center and the two guards have got to stay healthy, and the tackles have played so well, you want them to stay healthy too. This unit has been, I think, the unsung hero of the Packers offense this year, and maybe of the whole team. You look at the fact that the Packers quarterbacks have barely been sacked once a game on average over the course of the season. And when you add Jordan Love's reduced mobility in a lot of games, that's even more impressive. And then the way they've opened up holes for Josh Jacobs and company on the ground, the offensive line has really been spectacular, and they have got to stay healthy if this team wants to make a playoff run.
I know I share a name with him, but man, I'm really loving Sean Ryan because that dude is a freaking mauler in the run game. You knew he was a really good run blocker last year, but as a rookie, he had the PED suspension. You felt like, oh, is this another third-round rookie that's going to flop in Green Bay? And he's taken full control of that right guard job, and rightfully so. That's his job to lose from here on out. He's been a darn good player for the Green Bay Packers on that O-line. Hopefully they can stick together. Hopefully no catastrophic injuries coming up the last few weeks of the year, knock on wood. Some other injury news and notes for the Packers. Corey Ballantyne also on the injury list with a knee issue. He's been limited in practice this week. Luke Musgrave designated for return from the injured reserve list. He was limited on Thursday with that ankle issue that he had ankle surgery on earlier this season. It seems like he's getting a little closer to a return. And it was snowing up in Green Bay today, Gil. And Jair Alexander was a full participant in practice on Thursday. So you got to think if his knee was in rough shape that they probably wouldn't have practiced him as much as they did on Thursday out in the snow.
Yeah, it is definitely a good sign that he's a full participant. The question is, what is the best time and way to bring him back?
Now, before we talk more about the Packer defense, let's talk about the Packers offense against the Saints defense. The 5-9 New Orleans Saints marching into town. The Saints defense has a lot of good players, a lot of talent, but the defense has been a little rough this year. 30th overall in total defense. Green Bay's offense, total offense, 4th ranked unit in the NFL. The scoring has been really good. 27.1 points per game, 7th in the NFL. 231.4 passing yards per game. That's 11th in the league. And 144.4 rush yards per game. That's 4th in the league. New Orleans defensively, well, they're holding opponents to 22.3 points per game. That's tied for 13th in the NFL. But passing defense, rushing defense just really haven't been what we're used to seeing out of the Saints. 242.2 passing yards allowed per game this year. That's 28th in the league. And 134.4 rushing yards per game allowed this year. That's 27th in the NFL. That's bottom 5 in the NFL. It's been a rough go for the Saints this year on the defensive side of the ball. Still a lot of talent on that side, but what's a matchup that we should be keying on between the Packers offense and the Saints defense?
First things first, and we saw the Packers do it last week. They've got to run the football, got to come out and establish the run. And, to me, when you break it down, you've got Josh Jacobs and the 3 interior members of the offensive line that we mentioned. And then, obviously the key in my mind is Demario Davis. He is a Pro Bowl caliber player. He's leading the team in tackles. You've got to account for him. And I get the feeling they may try to double him.
They should.
Josh Myers and either one of the 2 guards, Elton Jenkins or Sean Ryan, will try to double up on him and just make sure he's neutralized. And if they can do that, they should be able to run the football on this defense.
And that Saints defensive front still has some good players. Brian Breezy, who leads the Saints in tackles, and he's 2nd in tackles for loss. You got Carl Granderson, who's one of the more underrated D tackles, in my opinion, in the NFL. Always been a good physical player on that front. Chase Young, former number 2 overall pick. He's kind of been a disappointment overall in the NFL, but still a solid, serviceable player. And then obviously you mentioned Demario Davis, who's the heart and soul of the middle of that defense. I personally am a big Demario Davis fan. I really like the way he plays, and he's just a solid pro. He's been a good player for so long. So, but the Saints rushing defense though has really just been poor, Gil. They're allowing opposing rushers to rush for 4.9 yards per carry. That's tied for second worst in the NFL. This Saints rushing defense is bad. You got to run Josh Jacobs at these guys early and often. Jacobs is the third leading rusher in the NFL. He's tied for fourth in rushing touchdowns. He's been a very good receiver out of the backfield as the season has gone on. We better see a lot of Josh Jacobs. As when the Packers make him the focal point of the offense, good things happen.
Yeah, and I mean, you run the ball with Jacobs, it sets up the play action passes, and it establishes dominance. And we saw it last week. Matt LaFleur admitted after the game, that was our game plan. And in a 10-play drive, 7 of those plays were runs by Josh Jacobs. 2 of them were passes to Josh Jacobs. And then I think the other play was a Jordan Love scramble for a yard. Mm-hmm. Other than that, it was the Josh Jacobs show. It worked. They scored a touchdown. Not only do you take the early lead, but you demoralize your opponent. You set up the fact that you are going to be physically dominant to start this game. You set the tone right away. And I think the Packers have to do that again on Monday night. And
you talk about establishing dominance. I just think of 2 dogs brushing their noses up against each other. And Josh Jacobs, I feel like he's the big dog, and he makes a big dog look like a puppy because he's ready for any test, man. He's like, hey, bring it, and I'm going to bring it even harder back. And Josh Jacobs is a stud. I love what he's done, and the Packers just keep feeding him. But for me, I'm going to look at a different matchup, and this is quarterback Jordan Love against Saints corner Alontae Taylor. Now, if you remember last year, these two teams met in the Packers home opener. The Packers were trailing 17-0 going into the fourth quarter. Love helped engineer a big comeback to win that game in regulation, 18-17. Taylor was a big reason why the Packers were scoreless on offense for so long. He had 5 total tackles in that game. He had a sack, a couple tackles for loss. He also defended 5 passes. Now, Alontae Taylor is a very aggressive, opportunistic corner. They like to throw him around all along that defense. He has 4 sacks this year. That's 4th on the team. He also has, I believe he also has like 7 tackles for loss. That's tied for 3rd on the team. But he also gets burned quite a bit. Per PFF, he has missed 18 tackles this year. He's allowed 68 catches. That's most by all corners in the NFL this season. So he's a very aggressive, opportunistic corner, but I feel like Jordan Love's got to make sure to keep an eye on him, where if this guy's in coverage, you got to attack him in the passing game. And if he's up on the line, you got to make sure that you have a good check with me call, and you got to make sure that you have him blocked because he will wreak havoc in the backfield if you let him.
It's high risk, high reward.
Yes, it is.
You've got to account for him. You've got to know where he is, but you could take advantage of him. And, to me, seeing either the combination of Christian Watson, Romeo Doubs, and Jaden Reed getting matchups on Alontae Taylor, I think that the Packers can definitely take advantage of that matchup if they're smart about it.
Yeah, he's an aggressive, opportunistic player. He also has 79 total tackles this year. That's 2nd on the team, and just kind of a ball hawk. The Saints definitely make it a point to get him close to the football. Kind of like the way that maybe Darnell Savage should have been used when he was in Green Bay, where just have him essentially aim and fire towards the football. That's kind of Alontae Taylor. You got to make sure that you block him up because he could really be a disruptor on that side of the field when the Packers offense on the field and when the Saints defense is on the field. Now, switching up to the Saints offense and the Packers defense. The Saints offense, remember, had that blistering start to the year. They opened the season with 2 back-to-back 40-plus point games. Total offense this year, the Saints are tied for 15th in the league. Green Bay's total defense, look at that. We're in week 15, and they're the 10th ranked unit on defense. The Green Bay Packers are. The offense for the New Orleans Saints, 22.1 points per game, tied for 17th in the league. They're the 20th ranked passing unit and the 11th ranked rushing unit. Green Bay's defense, they're allowing 20.5 points per game this year, 8th in the NFL. 215.4 passing yards per game. That's 15th in the league. And 105 rushing yards per game. That is 9th in the NFL. Gil, the defense obviously is hitting its stride right now. The offense for the Saints is really beleaguered, really beat up, and not in a good spot. What's a matchup that we got to key on to make sure that it kind of stays that way for the Packers defense and the Saints offense?
Yeah, see, this depends on the injury report. But
yeah,
if all things are equal and he plays, Alvin Kamara, to me, is somebody the Packers have to account for. And you only have to go back a few years to remember what a dominant performance he had down in New Orleans against the Packers. Traditionally, a back like Kamara who can come out of the backfield, catch passes, destroyed the Packers. Now you've got a healthy Edgerrin Cooper who has the speed to stay with Kamara if he plays. He's dealing with a calf injury, and he did not practice on Thursday. So the question becomes whether or not he's ready to go Monday, and if he is, how much can he contribute? But slowing him down, both as a runner and as a receiver, if he plays, to me, that's the linchpin to slow down and contain the New Orleans offense.
Now, I believe Kamara is dealing actually with a groin issue. I think that's what interim head coach Darren Rizzi did say is that it's a groin issue. And he actually said today that it's not looking very good for Monday Night Football, and he actually may miss the rest of the season. And that's a huge loss for the New Orleans Saints, who they're already missing Rashid Shaheed, who's on the IR, Chris Olave, who's on the IR, Derek Carr, who is probably out for the season as well as their starting quarterback. And now you have Alvin Kamara, who's just one of the most dynamic weapons out of the backfield in the NFL. He has 950 rushing yards this year. That's 11th in the league, 6 rushing touchdowns, 68 receptions, second amongst running backs behind Miami's Devon Achane, 543 receiving yards. That's best in the league amongst running backs. Now, Kamara didn't play against Green Bay last year because he was dealing with a suspension. He was suspended for that game against Green Bay. And this is the matchup that I was really looking forward to between essentially him and Edgerrin Cooper. And Edgerrin Cooper, for those who didn't follow the Seattle game on Sunday Night Football, Edgerrin Cooper was great, and he won the NFC Defensive Player of the Week award for the second time this year after he had 2 tackles for loss, a sack, and an interception his first game back after he missed 3 games with a hamstring injury. But yeah, Alvin Kamara is that's a massive loss for the Saints if he's not willing to go, and it makes life a lot easier for Green Bay's defense.
It really does. And look, you have some familiar names behind him. I mean, Kendre Miller is most likely going to get the bulk of the work if Kamara is limited or can't go, but you also have an old friend in Jamal Williams, although his use as a running back has been pretty limited this year.
Yeah, love Jamal Williams. Forever will love Jamal Williams. I still miss him in Green Bay. I know the Packers are in good shape. We don't need Jamal Williams anymore, but still love the guy. Forever a Packer. And for me, though, the matchup that I'm looking forward to watching, because Edgerrin Cooper is kind of that chess piece that I've wanted in Green Bay for so long, and we finally have it now. And now it's essentially Edgerrin Cooper, and this isn't the most sexy matchup on paper, but it's the Saints tight end combination of Juwan Johnson and Foster Moreau against Edgerrin Cooper. Because guess what? Johnson and Moreau, they're probably the 2 best receiving weapons available for the Saints that will be available for the Saints on Monday Night Football. Johnson has 36 catches this year, 375 yards and 3 touchdowns. He's 3rd on the team in all those categories. And we mentioned before where the Saints' top receiving weapons, they are likely unavailable on Monday Night Football with no Chris Olave, no Rashid Shaheed, who are both on IR. Alvin Kamara's season could be over. Then Foster Moreau has 23 catches for 302 yards and 4 touchdowns this year. He's tied for the team leads in touchdowns with another former friend in Marquez Valdes-Scantling for the Saints, who ended up joining the Saints midway through the year after he was released by the Buffalo Bills. But this is, if the Packers really want to keep the Saints in check and avoid and prevent them from marching all over the field at Lambeau Field, Edgerrin Cooper is going to have to be tasked with possibly defending and reading whatever Juwan Johnson, Foster Moreau are doing at all times. You got to think that the Saints are going to be doing a lot of 2 tight end sets on Monday Night Football, because I feel like that's really their only chance to possibly steal a win at Lambeau Field on Monday.
Yeah, especially if Kamara isn't able to go. You got to put your most talented players on the field, and also 2 tight ends could affect the Packers' blitzing schemes as well. So you're killing 2 birds with 1 stone there if you're trying to coordinate the offense of the New Orleans Saints.
You just hope the Packers can keep the momentum going from last week, where 7 sacks in Seattle against the Seahawks. And I understand where, hey, Geno Smith got hurt. I get that. But he was not doing much against that Packers defense, even when he was in the game. And the Packers defense they imposed their will. They were swarming like crazy. And the Saints offensive line has struggled against pressure this year. You don't have a veteran there like Derek Carr. It could be a very good day for the Packers defense, a good way to build momentum. And just, I feel like Edgerrin Cooper is definitely the key to that. And having a safety valve in Xavier McKinney, and a front four that is really finding their groove and rhythm, getting to the quarterback, could be a good day for the defense, Gil.
Yeah, I mean, quietly, Rashawn Gary has been much better at getting pressure in recent games. Maybe the last 4 or 5 games, we've seen Rashawn Gary pick up his pass rush. And then the other guy who I think has been quietly very effective and led the team with 2 sacks last week, Kingsley Enagbare. I mean, he really had a great game against the Seahawks.
Yeah, and Enagbare, the thing is with him, man, he should have more than a few sacks this year, because he missed so many sacks in the Bears game. He gets a little bit too high, and I feel like the coaches have definitely told him to get his pad level lower, and it's making an impact, and hopefully it does make an impact, because Lucas Van Ness is playing much better in the role that he is in as well since the Preston Smith trade. It's all very positive stuff. Now, before we wrap up real quick, just some key stats and figures between the Packers and the Saints. Let's look at the turnover ratio this year. Packers plus 10 overall this year. That's tied for 5th best in the NFL. Saints, well, they're plus 1. They've done a good job taking care of the football, 16th in the league. Penalties. Well, Green Bay, obviously not great on the penalty front this year. 94 penalties on offense. That's 9th most, but they've gotten better as the season has gone on. I'll give them that. The defense, 93 penalties this year, tied for 13th most in the league. While the Saints offense, 85 penalties this year, tied for 9th fewest in the NFL. The defense, 94 penalties. That's tied for 11th most in the NFL this season. 3rd down conversions. Green Bay's offense, 37.9%. Pretty much right in the middle, 15th overall. The defense, 35.7%. 35.7%. That is 8th best in the NFL right now. And then the New Orleans offense, 37.4% on offense, 18th in the league. The defense, 37.3%, 13th on defense. So these teams kind of neck and neck when it comes to 3rd down offense and defense. And then red zone touchdown percentage. Green Bay's offense, 56.9%, 14th in the league. The defense, 60%. That's tied for 20th. The New Orleans offense, well, they've been pretty good in the red zone this year, but now who knows what's going to happen with all these injuries right now. 60% on offense, 8th in the NFL. 51.2% on defense, tied for 8th best in the league. So the Saints, I know it's a beat-up team, but it's a team that's been competitive. They fired their head coach, Dennis Allen, a few weeks ago. Interim head coach, Darren Rizzi. They're still a competitive team under his watch. They're 3-2 in those 5 games since he's taken over, and they've been in every single game where they haven't lost a game by more than 7 points since Darren Rizzi has taken over. So a lot of stuff a lot of numbers show where you really cannot take this Saints team for granted.
No, you cannot take them lightly under any circumstances. We do not need another Tommy DeVito situation. That's the way I'm going to put it.
Nope.
We do not need that.
Yeah, I don't want Tommy Cutlets, or I don't want Spencer Cutlets, or whatever you want to call him. I don't want Spencer the Rattlesnake Rattler to just slither his way through the Packer defense on Monday. I just don't want to see that happen. I don't want to see Tommy DeVito 2.0. Speaking of the Saints, real quick injury news. Not practicing on Thursday includes quarterback Derek Carr, running back Alvin Kamara, wide receiver Marquez Valdes-Scantling, who's been a nice addition for the Saints, but not practicing this week. And then as well as defensive end Chase Young. Currently on the IR and the PUP list for the Saints, some pretty key players on this list includes cornerback Paulson Adebo, who's a pending free agent, a guy maybe the Packers should give a call to. I'm just saying. I know we're not in the offseason yet, but I'm just saying. Tight end Taysom Hill, former Packer training camp legend. Wide receiver Chris Olave, wide receiver Rashid Shaheed. And then offensive tackle Ryan Ramczyk is on the PUP list. He has missed the entire season after complications from offseason knee surgery. Sounds kind of familiar. David Bakhtiari. It happens with big guys. It doesn't just happen to the Packers, but some key injuries on that front for the Saints, Gil.
Yeah, it's cost them, and it's one of the reasons why they are 5-9. Let's face it, they are missing a lot of talent. And anytime you're missing your starting quarterback, that compromises the offense.
And 5 of the Saints' 9 losses this year have been within 1 score. They're in a lot of games, folks. They really are. You can't take this team lightly. Gil, why does Green Bay win on Monday? I keep wanting to say Sunday, but why do they win on Monday?
Green Bay wins if they don't take the Saints lightly. I think that's the biggest component. They have to take this game seriously, take care of business. If they get that early lead, do not let the Saints hang around and be dangerous, because if they do, they can come back and surprise you. Take care of business early and keep your foot on the gas.
If the Packers defense is aggressive, which I anticipate they will against an inexperienced fifth-round rookie quarterback in Spencer Rattler, with no Alvin Kamara, with an offensive line that has had an issue with pressure this year, and an offense that doesn't have a lot of weapons around Spencer Rattler, just attack this offense if you're the Packer defense, and just keep feeding Josh Jacobs the rock, man, and good things will happen. That's why Green Bay wins. Why does Green Bay lose?
Well, I think if they get sloppy, if the penalties come back, if they turn the ball, if they lose the turnover ratio by 2 or more, then I think they could be in some serious trouble. Jordan Love has done, knock on wood, a much better job of protecting the football since the bye week. That has to continue. If that all happens, this team should be able to take care of business. They lose if they turn the ball over and if they beat themselves.
I'll shorten it real quick. Green Bay loses if they beat themselves. Yep. That's it. Straight up. If they beat themselves, they are the only team who could lose it. They are the only team who could beat the Packers on Monday Night Football in Green Bay, in my opinion, coming up this week, is themselves. Gil, what's your prediction for Monday Night Football between the Packers and the Saints? Are we going to be celebrating a playoff clinching moment on Monday Night Football?
I think we will be. I think the Packers will take care of business. And I just think that they'll move the ball on the Saints. They'll cause a couple of turnovers. Packers 35, Saints 20.
Now, for me, I was a little frustrated with the Packers' third quarter in Seattle last week, and where they could have just easily gone. They could have just put the pedal to the metal. Malik Willis could have gotten snaps in the fourth quarter at quarterback. They could have put in the second-team defense and offense a lot sooner than they actually did. I think the Saints are going to linger around a little longer than we think. But I think the Packers will handle it. I think they win 27-13. So you have the Packers winning by 15. I have them winning by 14. I just think the Saints, it's just too much of an uphill climb. I know they're playing better football under Darren Rizzi, and they're competitive, but this is just too much of an uphill climb against a Green Bay team that's really playing some good ball. And
what's the irony here? I say 15, you say 14. The spread is 14.5. So
Vegas always knows, Gil.
They do.
They always know, and this is why you shouldn't bet, kids. This is why you shouldn't bet. And Gil, what articles do you have coming up on Packers Post and Cheesehead TV? Maybe you have some betting and gambling advice or something like that. I doubt that, but I'm just saying, you're not setting any lines this week, but what do you have cooking online?
Yeah, well, for Packers Post, I took a look at how the Packers have solved their kicking problems since signing Brandon McManus.
Knock on wood.
Yes. And also looked at 5 areas that the Packers have improved on as this season has gone on. While for Cheesehead TV, I took a look at which Packers I think deserved Pro Bowl consideration.
Who are some guys who deserve it? Outside Xavier McKinney and Josh Jacobs.
Well, those are the top 2. There are 3 others. I made a list of 5. There was one other that I could have gone with, but some interesting feedback I've gotten so far on this one.
When the Pro Bowlers are announced, it's always a popularity contest. There'll be some guys who should make it, who don't make it, and guys who shouldn't make it, who do make it, and that's just kind of the way life goes for the Pro Bowl. But yeah, obviously a good discussion. Tune into Gil Stuff, PackersPost.com, CheeseheadTV.com. Gil, you ready for some trivia?
Let's do it.
All right. Well, I got to find the question real quick. Packers rookie linebacker Edgerrin Cooper, clearly an asset on that Packers defense in his first game back from a hamstring injury this past Sunday. He was the star of the show. He registered 7 total tackles, 2 tackles for loss, 2 passes defended, 1 sack, and an interception. Chris Collinsworth was going all goo-goo gaga over him on Sunday night, and rightfully so. He helped pace the Packers to a 30-13 victory in the Emerald City. As a result of his great performance, Cooper was named the NFC Defensive Player of the Week for a second time this season. Gil, who was the last Packer to win the NFC Defensive Player of the Week award twice in one season?
I would have to think it would be Charles Woodson.
Charles Woodson is a great guess. That was my first guess too, but it's not. It was Clay Matthews in 2010. And Clay Matthews, obviously, that was the season where the Packers won the Super Bowl. He was the last Packer to win the Defensive Player of the Week award twice. And also, he was the runner-up that year for the NFL Defensive Player of the Year award that season, losing out to eventual Super Bowl runner-up Super Bowl champion runner-up Troy Polamalu of the Pittsburgh Steelers. He lost that by 2 total votes. Matthews also is the Packers' all-time sacks leader. Obviously, Clay Matthews was great. 2010, he was a guy who was playing out of his absolute mind. Big reason for the Packers winning that Super Bowl, forced that key fumble in Super Bowl 45 in Dallas. Clay Matthews, I don't know what your favorite memory of Clay Matthews is, Gil, but probably that Super Bowl strip was probably my favorite when he laid the lumber on Rashard Mendenhall.
It is time.
Yep. Kevin Green, he said it best. And I do
Kevin Green.
And I do also want to mention something personal on my end, Gil. I didn't mention this, but I'm going to say congrats to my old neighbor, Peggy Seegers-Braun. She is the recipient of the High School Athletic Director of the Year award given out by the Green Bay Packers. First time they've ever done this. She's the longtime High School Athletic Director, Divine Savior Holy Angels High School in Milwaukee, DSHA for short. And she's been at the AD at DSHA for the last 37 years, and she lived right down the road from me. And she's the first ever recipient of the Green Bay Packers Athletic Director of the Year award. So, Gil, it's a small world. I saw that. I was like, wait, hold on a sec. I know her. Her kids came over to our place for birthday parties all the time.
Well, congratulations to her, and great award, and great to be first, right?
Oh yeah. That's if you ain't first, you're last, as Ricky Bobby would say. And hopefully, the Packers finish first coming up on Monday night, first and foremost, and hopefully later into the playoffs as well. The 5-9 Saints marching into Lambeau Field on Monday Night Football against the 10-4 Packers. A win for Green Bay. They're in the playoffs their second straight year. Kickoff from Lambeau, scheduled for 7:15 Central, 8:15 Eastern over in New York by Gil, 6:15 Mountain Time. Gil, the Packers, they don't mess around. We should have a pretty nice Monday night coming up.
I hope so. I'm looking forward to it. Going to be a late night, but I'm looking forward to it.
I want to celebrate Festivus by not airing grievances about the Green Bay Packers. How about that?
There you go.
Yeah. Let's hope. Hey, go Pack, go, baby. Let's get one.
Absolutely. All right. Well, that's it for today. We'll be right back here next week. Follow us on Twitter at Packers, or to ask us questions. Or you can email us at gbpackerssean@gmail.com. Make sure you're subscribed to Packers Talk on iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. Big thanks to PackersTalk.com for powering our show, and thank you for listening. Until next time, go Pack, go.
Go Pack, go.